Definitely in jeopardy despite not just the loss to the Rams, but compounding with all the other losses that they took in this game. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the New Orleans Saints season is officially in jeopardy. We're going to take a look at where the team turns their attention now as the offseason feels so much closer despite just one loss in these last couple of weeks, and rightfully so, by the way. So we'll take a look at where the Saints head from here. We'll also take a look at the Saints' run defense, which has just been an absolute problem for them for, it feels like, many seasons now. Where do they go? What do they get done? How do they adjust that? We'll get to all of that. We're going to take a look at why this season is now in jeopardy for the New Orleans Saints, despite the Atlanta Falcons leaving the division wide open. And it comes down to not only a loss to the Los Angeles Rams, but the many other losses that the team unfortunately had to sustain throughout this game. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. The New Orleans Saints are officially in trouble. And it's not just because they lost the game 21-14 against the Los Angeles Rams. It's the compounding losses that took place throughout the game. Yes, the Saints lost this game to the Rams and now fall to 4-8 on the season. But on top of that, they also lose Taysom Hill for what looked like a pretty nasty injury. They lose yet another interior offensive lineman, another place or an area where the Saints have just not been able to stay healthy so far this season, and also ended up with an injury that sidelined starting safety Tyrann Mathieu and did not allow him to return in this game with a shoulder injury. So then you add on top of the loss, those losses, and you can understand maybe why people are looking at this game and going, well, unfortunately, this feels like kind of the swan song for the New Orleans Saints season. Now, is that true? No, there's still 5 games to go, and they have some pretty easy opponents still left on the schedule. They have a very beatable Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, as we saw today, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers struggled to close out their game up against the Carolina Panthers, and were it not a gift of a fumble by the Panthers, who were in field goal range already, by the way. Then all of a sudden Tampa, could have lost that game. And then this New Orleans Saints loss would have compounded and gotten even worse for them because not only did Atlanta lose, but Tampa could have lost, and that would have opened up the door well for the New Orleans Saints to be 1 game behind for the division lead. Now they're 2 games behind 2 teams that they don't own tiebreakers against at the moment. So that's a little bit tough. But you had that. And then you also have, on top of all that, kind of just where the Saints sit as of right now with their ability to, they've got the New York Giants on the way. They still have a really bad Las Vegas Raiders team that they play before the end of the season. Like, there's still a lot of winnable games for New Orleans as they go through here. The tricky part for the Saints, though, is do they have the talent available? They have the talent on their roster, but are they going to have the talent healthy and available to be able to take advantage of what is a favorable schedule to end the season? Now, the Washington Commanders are going to be very tough. There's no doubt about that. The Green Bay Packers in Lambeau, that's going to be an extremely tough game as well. So the Saints season probably was not going to extend to the postseason kind of one way or another, but they were putting themselves at least in position to be in conversation with the 2-game win streak after the firing of Dennis Allen. This was a winnable game for them, not a game that I was surprised to see them lose to the Rams, but it was a winnable game for them. I knew their game plan going in was going to be to keep the Rams off the field. They did a very good job of that. In the first quarter, the Rams only ran 3 plays on offense, a little bit over a minute in terms of time of possession. But the fact of the matter is that New Orleans showed that it is the team that its roster looks like it is. It's a team that is dealing with a ton of injuries on the interior offensive line, that doesn't have top wide receiver talent on their roster right now because their top wide receiver talent is also hurt. Not using the penalties as an excuse, but I'm just saying this is a team who has overperformed itself over the course of the last 2 wins against the Cleveland Browns and then a week before that up against the Atlanta Falcons. And so going into this game, this was just a team that looked like the team that it is. It didn't overperform. It struggled where this team has struggled all season, stopping the run, being able to really get the ball going on the offensive side past the 50-yard mark, all those other things that they've struggled with throughout the year. Those were the big kind of defining issues for New Orleans in this game. Are they a team that's completely hapless? Absolutely not. I mean, you look at teams like the New York Giants and the Las Vegas Raiders who are still on the Saints schedule, and those teams are absolutely abysmal compared to the New Orleans Saints. But the Saints just, in terms of the talent that they have available, the game that they played today is a game in which they looked like the team that they are. They didn't outperform the expectation. They didn't overperform their roster in this situation. They just kind of were the team that they kind of are right now. That's banged up, that's hurt, that's dealing with, issues over on defense. It's dealing with consistency issues on offense, all those other things. And then now you add in those losses of Nick Saldiveri, you add in the loss of Taysom Hill, and then you kind of have to wonder, okay, well, where does this team go now, right? I mean, they've got the offensive line talent on the interior. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know that the drop-off from Nick Saldiveri to Landon Young is really that dramatic. I don't think that the drop-off from Lucas Patrick to Nick Saldiveri was that dramatic either. Outside of Lucas Patrick's really, really strong starts this season, he kind of took a lot of steps back dealing with injury and stuff like that throughout the year. And so you're kind of at a wash right now with your interior offensive line, though you'd love to get Eric McCoy back out on the field, who the team did not have. He was a game time decision going into this one, but unfortunately was inactive for this matchup for New Orleans. And so, it just kind of is. The New Orleans Saints just kind of are who they are. But now the question mark, especially without Taysom Hill, is do they have the talent that they need to overperform at a later time? Is that going to be a real option for this team? Do they have the talent that they need to be able to do that when they travel to Lambeau, when they host the Washington Commanders? Like, are they going to be a team that's able to surprise some people and everything? I don't know. And it depends on how long Taysom Hill's out and all those other things. I mean, that was a pretty nasty looking injury. The knee kind of bent unnaturally the wrong way and all this other stuff. It was Jared Verse's helmet that caught him in the knee. And, I know the Saints get a lot of grief because of injuries and things like that, but what are you supposed to do when a guy takes a helmet to the knee? I mean, there's not really a lot that you can do in that situation and everything. So, it was great to watch this team be fun over the course of that 2-game win streak. I think there were some fun elements to this team again here, even in this loss to the Rams, particularly in the second half. You saw the big touchdown to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the 2-point conversion, fantastic catch by Dante Pettis. You saw some other big moments. Alvin Kamara running all over the place, third 100-yard rushing game of the season, 11th of his career. That ties him for 5th most in franchise history. He's now just barely over 100 yards away from his first ever 1,000-yard rushing season. He might get that next week in New York or in New Jersey going up against the Giants. So there's still a lot of stuff that you're looking at, that you're rooting for, that you're excited about when it comes to this team. It's just, do they really have what it takes to extend their season to the postseason? And if they do they have what it takes to be more than a one and done in the playoffs? I don't know that they do right now, but that's okay. Like, it just kind of is where they are at this point. So, or the New Orleans Saints just kind of are who they are, rather, at this point. So coming up next, let's take a look at the kind of the biggest glaring issue for New Orleans, which is very clearly their run defense. Where was the struggle? Can the New Orleans Saints fix it, or is it more of an offseason problem? I kind of lean to it being an offseason problem. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by Ice Shakers. Ice Shakers are absolutely awesome. They're these great workout bottles. They are made with stainless steel. They don't have that annoying little like metal ball in there that bounces around and makes all that gross noise and everything. Like, imagine that ball on a stainless steel mug. You don't want to mess with that. And that's what I absolutely love about these. And they are now licensed by the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, and college as well. So they make a great gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. These are created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers. You might have heard of them. They've sold over 1 million bottles. So absolutely opportunity here for you to get in with yours and be a bit of a home run when it comes to gifting and giving this holiday season. Go and check out Ice Shakers today. Order your team branded bottles at iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get 25% off of your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your favorite team with the best branded workout bottles on the market at Ice Shakers. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy Online is awesome, and especially around this time when it comes to the holidays, that's a big time for a lot of folks when it comes to maybe some feelings rising up, maybe loss of family, things like that. I know that's big for me around this time, and so therapy is huge in terms of a way to bring myself a little bit of comfort that doesn't go away no matter when the season changes. For some people, you stay cool in the winter months, or you keep cozy in the winter months by wrapping up in a warm blanket, enjoying hot cocoa, all these other things. For me, it's like stuff I got to do for myself that makes me puts me in that zone during the holiday season. And so I'm really grateful to therapy for being able to help me along with that. And I'm very grateful to BetterHelp for helping me along with that. So find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon. You get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Again, it's 10% off your first month at BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints' biggest issue is pretty clear, isn't it? The run defense, which needs a major overhaul this offseason. And just to be clear, when I talk about a major overhaul, I'm really specifically talking about the run defense more than anything else. And that overhaul, a lot of people might specifically point at personnel, but I think it's got to be more than that. I think we've watched this New Orleans Saints defense in the scheme, which was Dennis Allen's scheme that's now being run without Dennis Allen. We've watched this scheme with and without Dennis Allen struggle over the course of the past 3 years. This isn't a new issue for New Orleans by any stretch of the imagination. So we talk about a true overhaul of this. I think what we're really talking about is, a scheme change, kind of a different approach to how they want to go about addressing their philosophy behind defending the run, all that. The Saints this year so far, 24th in the NFL against the run. Last year, they were 22nd against the run in terms of yards. The year before that, they were 24th. This is just kind of where they've been hovering. This is kind of like what I was just talking about in terms of the team kind of being in this game, who we've kind of always figured they would be right now, considering the state of their roster and all these other things. But I think there's more than just like the personnel and the execution. I think the scheme needs to be kind of reevaluated. And that's going to happen inherently when you hire a new head coach. And that new head coach is probably going to bring in a new defensive coordinator to come in and take things over. You have kind of a de facto defensive coordinator and play caller right now in Joe Woods, but it's not really Joe Woods' system, is it? It's Dennis Allen's system being run, by Joe Woods and Michael Hodges and others that are helping with the run game throughout this and stuff like that. And so, it's a little tough when you have like a defensive scheme and a defensive system that changes hands and then you're expected to uphold it. It's even more challenging when that defensive system that's changing hands and that you're being expected to uphold was kind of already failing in the first place. Like we just mentioned, 22nd in the NFL last year, 24th in the NFL the year before that when it comes to run defense. So, you know what I mean? Like, what could we really expect from this team at this time? And so I think a couple of things that you can see that didn't go well for New Orleans. Cam Jordan, I asked Cam Jordan about it. He kind of mentioned a couple different things, and that seems to be the story for the Saints run defense and the issues that they've had all throughout the season is kind of the moving target, right? Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because this game, this is a problem. This game, this is a problem. And this game, this something else is a problem and all that kind of stuff. And so when you have kind of that moving target of issues, it makes it really hard to adjust. And especially when you're already in week 13, about to go into week 14, teams don't usually become and flip when they've struggled against something an entire season, they don't usually just all of a sudden get better at it, right? So I think, you can look at some games where tackling was an issue. I think there were some plays maybe where that was an issue for New Orleans today against the Rams, but I don't know if that was really the big thing. I think for me, it was more gap integrity, right? It's run fits, all those other things. Cam Jordan, Saints defensive lineman, Saints defensive end, mentioned that there were a lot of players after the game that were talking about, run fits and gap integrity and all those other things. I also think that the Saints, and we've seen this year after year after year, they just lose the line of scrimmage. You see almost every run play, the Saints defensive line getting walked backwards. And so when you're talking about, yards before contact and things like that, which we've harped on a bunch on this show, if you're an everyday, you're probably tired of hearing me talk about yards before contact, but here we are again having that conversation, right? Because the Saints defensive line, particularly on the interior in the run game, just kind of doesn't get any push. And so they end up getting moved off of their spots. They end up getting walked back and all those other things. I think that that's the other piece when it comes to all this, is that the Saints just aren't winning the line of scrimmage. And again, that's not a new issue for them. Like, as long as the Saints have been struggling against the run, we've been talking about the pushback of that, or the walk back of that defensive line, who have not been able to stonewall and hold at the line of scrimmage, or even push and win at the line of scrimmage, right? And walk some of the offensive linemen back. We've seen it in some games. They did a really good job of that, actually, against Cleveland just a couple weeks ago before the bye week. But it wasn't something that was sustainable for them as they move forward. And then you look at the 3 games where the Saints were kind of at their best when it came to the run game. Week 1 against Carolina, week 2 against the Dallas Cowboys, and then the couple weeks ago against the Cleveland Browns. Those were all 3 games where you were also scoring points on the offensive side. So the other piece is that the team is not able right now, or has not been able to consistently force opposing offenses to become one-dimensional and turn to the passing game. And actually, if you watch this Saints game against the Rams, the Saints did a really good job against Matthew Stafford. He only threw for 183 yards, 1 yard fewer than Derek Carr threw for in this game. But I would say that Matthew Stafford was far and away the worst quarterback of the two. He hit on a couple of plays, but for every play that he hit, I thought Derek Carr hit as well. And Matthew Stafford maybe didn't have the turnover-worthy plays that Derek Carr had. He tried to fit one in a really tight window in the middle of the field to Foster Moreau, a little bit ill-advised there and stuff like that. But I thought that they did a better job against the pass in this game than they did against the run. I think that's pretty clear and evident, right? I mean, we were talking about a Saints offense, or a Saints defense, that actually shut out the Los Angeles Rams. First time ever that a Sean McVay offense in the first half was shut out in a regular season game. And a lot of the reason why that ended up being the case was because of the success that they had against the passing game. But then in the second half, because of the success of the Rams running game, you saw the passing game open up, right? Big completions down the field on play action passes and things like that. That's the compounding issue when you're allowing teams to be two-dimensional, get their run game going, and then the compounding issue of what happens when a run game is working, and how a good offense like a Sean McVay offense takes advantage of that by outlasting you later on in the game. And you could see that there were times where the Saints defense just kind of looked gassed and all that during, longer extended drives and stuff like that by the Rams. It was not too terribly dissimilar from what the Rams did against the Saints last season in LA. They ran the football, and then were able to build off of that successful run game by getting after and opening up their passing game. We saw drives of 12 plays, of 11 plays, of 8 plays from the Los Angeles Rams. But for the Saints, they had drives of 12, 14, 11, 6, 14, like plays as well. So they were staying on the field. The difference was in the red zone. If you ask me, the Los Angeles Rams came up with 3 scores in the red zone, all 3 touchdowns. All 3 of their touchdowns were all red zone touchdowns. I thought the officiating was awful in this game, but that's beside the point, because it's not why the Saints lost. But you also saw the Saints come up empty in the red zone, 0 for 2, including a 36-yard field goal that Blake Grupe ended up missing, or a 30, somewhere around a 30-yard field goal that Blake Grupe ended up missing. And so I think all that kind of stuff just kind of, again, it's the question of compounding, right? And compounding within a loss, compounding losses, that's going to make things really tough for you to win within a game, but then also make things really tough for you to be able to extend throughout the season. So So those are the things that I look at. I mean, you can kind of throw a dart when it comes to the run game. Everybody kind of shared a little bit of fault in terms of that. But I think that the offense and the inability to get points early, especially when you had the opportunity to really open that game up, only scoring 6 points in the first half when you held the opposing team to 0 points, not ideal in that situation. I think that there's a lot that you could have done there to maybe aid your defense by putting points on the board if you're an offense. But play calling, some things like that just didn't really work for New Orleans. And that's just, again, the truth of who they are at this moment. Coming up next, where do the New Orleans Saints go from here? And I think that a big part of it is everyone's going to turn their focus over to the organization, to the offseason. But I think that the organization shouldn't be so hasty. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. The New Orleans Saints might have dropped this game to the Los Angeles Rams, but hasn't impacted their favorability going into next week's game over on the East Coast as they take on the New York Giants. The Saints opening this weekend or opening this weekend for next weekend's game as 4.5-point favorites on the road heading to Darren Rizzi's home state of New Jersey. So you can go and check them out. And of course, you can get in on a ton of other action over at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get put down $5 for their first bet. And if you win, you get $150 in bonus bets. You can download the app and then get started with everything over at FanDuel Sportsbook, including live betting, play-by-play, latest stats, all that in the same place where you place your bets as well. You can find all of it at FanDuel.com. That's where you're going to head to join today. And you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more over at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at Game Time, the absolute best place to go to buy tickets for your favorite event. It doesn't matter if you're looking for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, or more. You're going to be able to find it all over at Game Time. And with Game Time Picks, it's going to serve as a curation method to make sure that it's serving you up all of the best deals without having to sort through thousands and thousands of tickets. You're able to use Game Time Picks to get some pretty affordable seats to the Saints game against the Rams. You'll probably be able to do it if you're over in the New York area as well. If you're an East Coast New Orleans Saints fan, great opportunity to pick up some tickets, head to New Jersey and take in the New Orleans Saints, probably getting a win against the New York Giants on the road. Don't forget to toggle on all-in pricing as well so that you're not taken by surprise by any fees by the time you get to checkout. And you can even see your view from your seats before you buy them, because Game Time is taking all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Go ahead and download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints season might feel like it's over, but don't expect the organization to start turning its focus to the offseason just yet. I think the run defense conversation that we just had is something that the Saints are not going to be able to address with 5 games left in the season. So like they're going to go and find some defensive linemen somewhere that makes their defensive line all of a sudden winning at the line, win the line of scrimmage. You're not going to find something that you're going to adjust over on the defense from a scheme perspective or anything that's going to all of a sudden flip the switch on that and stuff. That's going to have to be stuff that they completely rebuild over the course of the offseason. But don't expect the Saints to start to look ahead to the offseason just yet. I think that this is going to be a team that's going to continue to do what it does best and what it always loves to do, which is just compete while they can, and I don't think that that's a bad choice. The Saints right now, in terms of draft pick at the moment, sit with the 9th overall draft pick, but that's not something they should play to maintain. It's not something that they should play to improve in terms of losing games so they can get a better draft pick. Forget all that. The gap between the 4th overall pick and the 16th overall pick in this year's draft isn't really that steep anyway. It's a pretty kind of okay draft class. And so I don't think they need to pay attention to any of that. I think that the big thing for them is Darren Rizzi, even though he wasn't able to match that Sean Payton start back in 2006 as a 3-0 head start or 3-0 start as the New Orleans Saints head coach. He would have been the second to do that, first since Sean Payton, and would have put him in position actually with a 4-0 start going up with the Giants next week, who are abysmal. He might not be able to achieve that, but hey, go out there and win games anyway. Like, go out there and compete, go out there and have fun, be a fun team, do all that stuff. Like, it was great to see this team like fight back in the second half. And, as the game started to open up and Los Angeles started to put points on the board, I thought the Saints found moments where they responded well. They didn't respond well enough. Don't get me wrong. They still lost the game, but great to see them respond. Right. So, like, if nothing else, continue to do that. Continue to go out there and compete. Continue to put good tape up there. Darren Rizzi's still vying for an opportunity to be the long-term head coach. And I think he should go out there and try to build the best resume for himself possible. And look, overall, he might not be the guy for New Orleans, not because he wins or loses games this year, but because somebody else might blow them away in an interview, or somebody unexpected might want to actually take this job in New Orleans. And, look, if the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Commanders were able to sell themselves last in recent off seasons. And I know the Washington job looks great now, but it did not look great over the course of the off season. If those teams can sell themselves, the Saints can sell themselves too. And so it's all good. Like, they'll figure all that out. But I do think that with those changes at head coach, it's going to bring about changes all over the roster, all over the coaching staff, all that. Like, has Clint Kubiak done enough to not be a one and done guy if a new head coach takes over that's not Darren Rizzi and wants to bring in his own offensive coordinator, or an offensive head coach who would be the play caller becomes the Saints' next head coach? I can't say that he has. I think there's a lot of people that are talking about like him being not being too conservative in this game and everything like that. I disagree. I thought the play calls were there. Just the Rams played good defense and took away a lot of what the Saints were trying to do deep to an extent, right? The Saints still found those moments. Big completion down the field to Kevin Austin Jr., big completion for a touchdown, 28 yards down the field to Marquez Valdez-Scantling for a score. I mean, all those things were still there. But my bigger concern is, how many times are you going to run a pitch on 3rd and 2 and watch it not work? How many times are you going to, the big thing for me, and I'm going to be honest, and I'll ask this on Monday when we get to the facility to talk with Darren Rizzi again for the day after press conference. I don't know if it was a Saints thing or if it was something that the Rams did on that 4th and 2 play. But on the 4th and 2 play, which was the last offensive play for the team in this game, which was the most important play in this game and potentially ends up being the most important play in this season for the team. You have Jared Verse, one of the NFL's best rookie pass rushers, and by all intents and purposes, one of the NFL's best pass rushers, one-on-one with your tight end. And listen, Foster Moreau, he can handle it. He's got the experience. He's got the skill set. If there's any tight end that you want blocking in that situation, it's probably Foster Moreau. But it feels like you would try to get your star rookie left tackle, who's the best pass blocking left tackle in the rookie tackle in the NFL right now. It feels like you would have your best guy on their best guy and not have or allow Jared Verse to be isolated one-on-one with any tight end in that situation on a 4th and 2 that you absolutely needed. It feels like you would not allow that to happen in that situation. And so I don't know. I don't know if that was part of what the actual play call created or called for, or if that's something that the Rams did that created that mismatch and created the opportunity for them to be able to get that. But certainly not something that you would expect as a look if you're the New Orleans Saints on the biggest play potentially of the season for the team. And you wanted to see a spot where you saw where Taysom Hill's injury ended up having a big impact. How about the 3rd and 4 right before that 4th and 2? How about the 4th and 2 itself? You're not able to go out there and pick up the short yards that you're typically looking to pick up with the Taysom Hill when he's out of the game with what looked like, again, a pretty nasty injury. And so I think it's just kind of where the Saints reside at the moment. They reside as a team that is banged up and doesn't have the roster that it intended to have here going into the 14th week of the NFL season, and that they're looking to overperform with what they have. And if they're not able to overperform, then they won't win games. And this was a game where they didn't overperform and they didn't win this game. Next week, they'll probably overperform and they'll beat a bad team in the New York Giants. And great, good for them, because it makes for fun football. And so I think that's the next thing that you're looking at there. And then look, when you change the head coach and you potentially change the offensive play caller and you change the potential offensive scheme and all those other things, then the question becomes, does Derek Carr fit in terms of the future of what this team looks like? Are the Saints even in a situation where they can move on from Derek Carr? Not exactly and everything, but is that really the team's biggest issue? I don't think so. I think the team's biggest issue is the team as a whole. They just aren't kind of the team that they expected to be at this point for a variety of different reasons, for a plethora of different reasons. And so, they just kind of are where they are at the moment. I think moving ahead here, as we discuss this team, I think the things that we're going to be looking at are, who they are right now versus what they'll look like in the offseason and what things could potentially change, how this season continues to shape what the offseason looks like, all those other things. I don't think that there's a situation here to where anything that happens for the rest of the year doesn't immediately also influence what's happening after the year. So at this point, it's kind of just you're kind of riding the wave to see what this team looks like by the end of it all, to see where they go over the course of the offseason, right? So everything now just kind of influences where they go after the year. So big decisions for this New Orleans Saints team. Not able to pull out a win here against the Los Angeles Rams. Again, not a surprising result for New Orleans, but one that is definitely in their grasp and one that they would love to have been able to win. But variety of different reasons why that wasn't able to happen. Coming up in tomorrow's episode after Darren Rizzi's presser, we'll be here with the second episode on Monday to get you updated with everything that we pick up from his presser. Going into Tuesday, we'll kind of take a look at the future of this team, where changes should be expected, all that. And then getting into Wednesday, we'll start looking ahead to the New York Giants game for the following week. And so we'll do kind of a variety of getting you ready for this weekend's game, but also looking ahead to the big questions that linger in this New Orleans Saints team's future. So we'll have all that coming up for you here throughout the week as we continue on here at Locked On Saints. I appreciate you very much for being here for another episode of the show and for continuing to support, even when the team loses, means the world. I really do appreciate it. We'll have much more for you here as we continue on throughout the week and throughout the rest of the season. Appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.